3 minutes. That's all it took. A whisper inside palace walls, and suddenly, everything changed. A secret so tightly guarded it was never meant to breathe outside royal corridors has now slipped into the world. Catherine's coronation dress is already being made. But here's the question no one is asking out loud. Why now? Because if preparations have begun, then a decision, one that could reshape the monarchy forever, has already been made behind closed doors. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It didn't arrive as a headline. It didn't break with ceremony. It slipped out quietly, almost too perfectly, as if someone had calculated the exact moment the world would be most vulnerable to its impact. A palace source, unnamed, untraceable, but disturbingly precise, confirmed what should have remained buried deep within royal protocol. Catherine's coronation dress is not being considered, not being discussed, but already being made. And in the language of the monarchy, that distinction changes everything. Because nothing within those walls begins without certainty. Nothing moves forward unless the outcome has already been decided. This is not about fabric or design. It never was. A coronation dress is a declaration, a silent announcement that a future is no longer hypothetical. It is locked, sealed, and unfolding. The moment the first thread is chosen, the moment the first stitch is placed, it signals that the crown is no longer a distant possibility, but an approaching reality. And yet, the public has heard nothing. No official statement, no carefully worded transition, just silence. Heavy, deliberate silence that now feels less like control and more like concealment. Because the timeline doesn't make sense. It refuses to align with the traditions the monarchy has followed for generations. These preparations are happening too early, too quietly, and far too deliberately to be dismissed as precaution. Inside the palace, something is accelerating. Meetings that were once routine have taken on an urgency that insiders struggle to hide. Movements are more calculated, appearances more measured. There is a tightening, an invisible pressure building beneath the polished surface of royal duty, and those close enough to feel it know that something has shifted in a way that cannot be undone. What makes this even more unsettling is the breach itself. Royal coronation attire has always been one of the most protected secrets within the institution, guarded not just by tradition, but by an unspoken understanding that some things must remain unseen until the exact moment they are revealed. For this information to escape now, in this way, suggests something far more intentional than a careless mistake. It hints at fractures, at voices within the palace willing to let the truth slip, even if only in fragments. And that raises a question no one inside those walls can comfortably answer: who wanted this to be known? Then there's Catherine. At the center of it all, yet perhaps the most exposed by it. There are early whispers, quiet and cautious, suggesting she may not have anticipated this moment arriving so soon, or at least not being revealed in this way. Because once the world knows, even in part, there is no stepping back. The role begins to form around her, shaping expectations, narrowing choices, pulling her closer to a destiny that now feels less like a future, and more like an inevitability unfolding in real time. And with each passing hour, the weight of that inevitability grows heavier. Even the smallest details are beginning to align in ways that are impossible to ignore. Subtle shifts in scheduling, appearances that carry a different tone, a different gravity, interactions that feel less like routine and more like preparation. It's all quiet, almost invisible, unless you're looking closely, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. The pattern is forming, piece by piece, and it points toward something the palace has not yet dared to say out loud. And as the leak spread like wildfire beyond the palace gates, it began to uncover something even more unsettling. This wasn't just preparation. It was a signal. Behind every royal coronation lies a team that sees everything but says nothing. Except this time, something slipped. The artisans entrusted with crafting Catherine's coronation dress are not just designers. They are silent witnesses to history in motion. And now, for the first time, their involvement has surfaced before the crown itself has been claimed. So what exactly have they been asked to create? And why does it feel like they were told to begin before the world was ready? Inside the monarchy, there exists a circle so tightly guarded that even senior officials rarely step inside it. These are the chosen few, the elite dressmakers whose hands shape the visual identity of power itself. They do not speak, they do not leak, and they do not make mistakes. For generations, their loyalty has been absolute, their silence unquestioned. Which is why this moment feels different, because for their work to be exposed now, even in fragments, suggests that something within that silence has shifted. And when silence breaks in a place like this, it's never accidental. What they've been asked to create is not just a garment. It is a statement encoded in silk and thread, a carefully constructed message that will one day be read by millions, without a single word being spoken. The materials alone tell a story: rare fabrics sourced with urgency, patterns chosen with intention, embroidery that carries meanings only a select few can interpret. Nothing about this process is ordinary. Nothing about it suggests hesitation. It feels deliberate, precise, and most importantly, final. There are whispers of late-night sessions, of workshops sealed off with a level of restriction that goes beyond standard protocol. Access limited, conversations controlled. Even those within the palace hierarchy reportedly kept at a distance. It's not just secrecy, it's containment. Because the fewer people who know, the longer the illusion can be maintained. But illusions have a way of slipping, especially when too many pieces are already in motion. And within those hidden rooms, something else lingers. A quiet understanding among those involved that they are not simply preparing for a possibility, they are participating in a certainty. The language of coronation attire has always been symbolic, layered with references to legacy, authority, and continuity. Every element is chosen not just to represent the present, but to define the future. Which means that if Catherine's dress is already taking shape, then her role is no longer being imagined. It is being confirmed. That realization carries weight. Not just for the monarchy, but for Catherine herself. Because a dress like this does not wait. It does not pause for doubt or delay. Once it begins, it moves forward with a momentum that is almost impossible to stop. And those crafting it know this. They feel it in every decision, every adjustment, every detail that brings the design closer to completion. There is no room for uncertainty in their work-only execution of what has already been decided elsewhere. Yet beneath that precision, there is unease. Subtle, unspoken, but undeniably present. Because even the most loyal insiders can sense when something is happening faster than it should. When timelines feel compressed. When preparation begins to outpace explanation. And in those moments, silence becomes heavier, harder to maintain, as if the truth is pressing against it from the inside. Because the deeper this process goes, the clearer it becomes that this is not a rehearsal. There is no contingency here, no alternate path quietly waiting in the background. This is commitment. This is direction. This is a monarchy moving forward with a decision it has not yet shared with the world. But if the dress is already being made, then the question becomes unavoidable. What has the palace already decided that the public hasn't yet been told? Royal transitions are supposed to unfold with precision, patience, and ceremony. Not like this. Not in whispers, leaks, and rushed preparations. If Catherine's coronation dress is already in motion, then the timeline has shifted, and not in a way the public was meant to notice. Something is accelerating inside the monarchy, something that suggests the future queen may be stepping into her role far sooner than anyone ever imagined. For generations, the monarchy has relied on predictability. Every transition carefully paced, every announcement choreographed to maintain control, to project stability, to ensure that nothing ever feels sudden. But what is happening now doesn't follow that pattern. It disrupts it. Because the existence of that dress already underway, already taking form points to a decision that has bypassed the usual rhythm entirely. This is not preparation for a distant future. This is movement towards something immediate, something already unfolding behind closed doors while the public is still being told to wait. And when timelines shift in an institution built on tradition, it is never without cause. There is pressure here, unmistakable and intensifying. The kind of pressure that doesn't reveal itself directly, but instead shows up in subtle fractures, in rushed decisions, in quiet urgency, in the need to act before questions can even be formed. Something inside the palace is pushing this forward, something powerful enough to override the monarchy's most sacred instinct, control through patience. That pressure does not exist in isolation. It lands somewhere. And right now, it lands on Catherine. Because the moment the timeline accelerates, so does the weight placed upon her. What was once framed as a future role, distant and gradual, now feels immediate, unavoidable. The shift from one day to very soon is not just a change in timing, it is a transformation of reality. Expectations tighten. Responsibilities deepen. And the space she once had to adapt, to prepare, to breathe, begins to close in around her. Yet outwardly, everything remains calm. That is the illusion the monarchy has perfected over centuries. Public appearances continue. Smiles remain steady. Words are carefully chosen to reveal nothing beyond what is absolutely necessary. But beneath that surface, something is moving faster than anyone is willing to admit. Engagements carry a different tone, now less ceremonial, more symbolic. Interactions feel more deliberate, as if roles are quietly being redefined without ever being announced. And then there is William, because if Catherine's position is shifting, his cannot remain untouched. Early signs suggest that his role too is evolving subtly but unmistakably. There is a gravity to his presence now that feels different, heavier, as though he is stepping into something larger, something closer than originally planned. And when both of them begin to shift at the same time, it stops being coincidence. It becomes strategy. It becomes inevitability. Which leads to the most unsettling realization of all this may already be decided. Not in theory, not in discussion, but in finality. The kind of finality that does not require public confirmation because it has already been accepted internally. The kind that moves forward quietly, confidently, without waiting for permission from the outside world. Because once the monarchy decides, everything else becomes a matter of timing. And timing right now is no longer what it used to be. The contrast is impossible to ignore. Public calm versus private acceleration. Stillness on the surface, urgency beneath. A system designed to appear unshaken now, quietly adjusting itself at a pace that feels almost uncomfortable. And the more closely you look, the more it becomes clear that this is not a moment of stability, it is a moment of transition, already in progress, already reshaping the future before it has even been acknowledged. And yet, beneath the surface of this accelerating timeline, another question begins to take shape. Was Catherine ever truly given a choice in any of this? To the world, she is composed, graceful, unshaken. But behind palace walls, Catherine is facing a reality few can comprehend. A coronation dress isn't just a garment, it's a point of no return. And if it's already being made, then the life she once controlled may already be slipping into something far more demanding, far more permanent. The real question is, how much of this was her decision, and how much was decided for her? Because what appears effortless on the surface is often built on a quiet, relentless pressure underneath. Catherine has spent years mastering that balance, presenting calm while carrying expectation, offering stability while navigating uncertainty. But this moment is different. This is not a gradual evolution into duty. This feels abrupt, accelerated, as though the timeline of her life has been rewritten without her consent. And once that realization settles in, it changes everything. There is a weight that comes with knowing your future has already been quietly sealed. Not announced, not celebrated, but decided. It's the kind of knowledge that isolates. Because how do you share something that isn't meant to be spoken yet? How do you prepare for a role that the world doesn't officially know you're stepping into? That silence becomes its own burden, one she must carry alone, even while standing in front of millions who believe they understand her life. Her public image remains flawless, carefully constructed, meticulously maintained. Every appearance measured, every word controlled, every expression aligned with the expectations of a future queen. But beneath that control, there are signs. Small, almost imperceptible shifts that suggest something deeper is unfolding. A pause that lingers a second too long. A smile that feels just slightly restrained. These are not mistakes, they are glimpses of pressure. Moments where the weight of what's coming begins to surface, even if only for a fraction of time. Because the expectations placed upon her now are no longer abstract. They are immediate. She is no longer preparing to one day embody stability, she is being asked to become it. Now, in real time, under circumstances that feel increasingly uncertain. The monarchy depends on that image, depends on her ability to hold everything together while everything around her quietly shifts. And that kind of responsibility doesn't just demand strength, it demands surrender. Then there's the possibility that makes this even more complex. What if the leak itself caught her off guard? What if this carefully controlled transition, this silent progression toward inevitability, was never meant to be revealed this early? Because if that's true, then Catherine is not just dealing with the weight of her future, she is dealing with the loss of control over how that future is introduced to the world. And for someone who has lived within the boundaries of precision and timing, that loss can feel destabilizing in ways few can truly understand. Her relationship with duty is changing. What once may have felt like a role she could grow into is now becoming something fixed, something immovable. It's no longer about adapting, it's about accepting. Accepting that certain decisions have already been made. Accepting that the path ahead is narrowing, becoming more defined with each passing moment. And perhaps most difficult of all, accepting that there may be no way to step back, even if part of her wanted to. Because this is the quiet truth behind the headlines, behind the speculation, behind the whispers of a dress already being made. It's not just about a future queen preparing for her moment, it's about a woman navigating the realization that her moment may no longer be hers to control. But Catherine is not the only one affected by this unfolding shift. Because within the royal family, not everyone may be ready or willing to accept what's coming next. The monarchy thrives on unity, or at least the illusion of it. But when power begins to shift unexpectedly, cracks start to form. The revelation of Catherine's coronation dress has done more than spark public curiosity, it has ignited quiet tensions within the palace itself. Because not everyone benefits from a faster transition, and not everyone is ready to step aside. What was once a controlled, carefully balanced institution is now facing something far more unstable: uncertainty from within. There are growing whispers, not from the outside world but from inside the palace itself, suggesting that the timing of this transition is far from universally accepted. Disagreements don't erupt openly here. They never have. Instead, they simmer beneath the surface, hidden behind protocol and politeness, expressed through silence rather than confrontation. But silence, in this case, is beginning to feel louder than words. Because Catherine's rise, no longer distant, no longer theoretical, changes the structure of influence in ways that cannot be ignored. Every step she takes forward inevitably shifts someone else back. And within a system where hierarchy defines identity, that kind of movement is never simple. It creates tension. It forces adjustments. It unsettles those who once held a certain position, a certain relevance, and now find themselves quietly repositioned without acknowledgement. There are signs of this tension, subtle but undeniable. Conversations that grow shorter, decisions that take longer, a hesitancy in places where certainty once existed. These are not random occurrences, they are the quiet indicators of a system recalibrating itself under pressure. And the more quickly that pressure builds, the harder it becomes to maintain the appearance of unity. Because unity, in the monarchy, is not just tradition, it is strategy. The public must believe in it. The stability of the institution depends on it. But behind closed doors, that unity can be fragile, especially when change feels forced rather than natural. And right now, this change does not feel gradual. It feels sudden. It feels accelerated. And that alone is enough to create division. Then comes the more unsettling possibility, the idea that this leak was not an accident at all. That it may have been allowed, even orchestrated, by those within the palace who stand to gain or protect something from its exposure. Because in an environment where information is power, releasing even a fragment at the right moment can shift the entire narrative. It can force conversations that were never meant to happen. It can reveal truths that others were trying to delay. If that's the case, then this is no longer just about a dress or a timeline. It becomes something far more complex, a reflection of internal factions, each with their own interests, their own strategies, their own vision of how the monarchy should move forward. And when those visions begin to conflict, even subtly, the consequences can ripple outward in ways no one fully controls. Alliances begin to shift. Quietly, carefully. Individuals who once stood firmly aligned start to reposition themselves, not out of disloyalty but out of necessity. Because when the future becomes uncertain, survival within the system requires adaptation. And adaptation, in a structure as rigid as the monarchy, is never without consequence. What makes this moment particularly dangerous is how invisible it all remains, at least for now. The public still sees composure, still sees continuity, still sees a royal family united in purpose. But beneath that image, something is changing. Lines are being drawn, even if they are not yet visible. Loyalties are being tested, even if no one is willing to admit it. And the longer this shift continues without acknowledgement, the harder it becomes to contain. Because pressure, no matter how carefully managed, eventually finds a way to surface. And when it does, it rarely does so quietly. And if this divide continues to deepen, it raises an even more dangerous possibility that the public may soon begin to notice. The palace may control the narrative, but it can't control the reaction. Within minutes of the leak, speculation turned into obsession. Social media erupted. Headlines spiraled. And suddenly, Catherine's coronation dress wasn't just a rumor, it was a symbol of something much bigger. But the response hasn't been entirely celebratory. And that's where things start to get complicated. It began with a whisper, but it didn't stay that way for long. The moment the information surfaced, it moved faster than the palace could contain it, spreading across platforms, across borders, across audiences who were no longer willing to wait for official confirmation. People weren't just reacting, they were dissecting, analyzing, questioning every detail, every implication. Because this wasn't just about a dress. It was about what the dress represented, and more importantly, what it revealed. For many, it triggered fascination. The idea of Catherine stepping into her role as queen no longer distant, no longer theoretical, captured attention in a way few royal developments ever do. There was excitement in that shift, a sense of witnessing history before it had even been formally announced. But that excitement didn't exist in isolation. It was accompanied by something else, something sharper, something more uncertain. Because alongside the admiration came skepticism. Questions began to surface, not about whether this was true, but about why it was happening now and why it had been kept hidden until this exact moment. The timing felt off. The secrecy felt deliberate. And the more people thought about it, the more the narrative began to shift from curiosity to suspicion. What else, they wondered, was being prepared without their knowledge? That's where the divide began to take shape. On one side, those who embraced the idea of Catherine's rise, seeing it as a natural progression, even a necessary one. On the other, those who saw the leak as a sign of something less stable, an institution moving too quickly, revealing cracks it could no longer fully conceal. The same piece of information, interpreted in completely different ways, each carrying its own emotional weight. And then the media stepped in not to calm the situation, but to amplify it. Every angle explored, every theory pushed further into the spotlight, every detail stretched into something larger than itself. What began as a controlled leak quickly became an uncontrollable narrative, shaped not by the palace, but by those observing it from the outside. And once that control is lost, it's rarely regained. Because the monarchy has always relied on its ability to guide perception, to reveal only what it chooses, when it chooses. But this moment disrupted that balance. It exposed something raw, something unfinished, something that wasn't meant to be seen yet. And the public responded accordingly, not just with interest, but with intensity. That intensity brings pressure. Not abstract, distant pressure, but immediate personal pressure that lands directly on those at the center of it all. Catherine, already navigating an accelerated path toward an uncertain future, now finds herself under an even sharper lens. Every appearance, every gesture, every word now carries added meaning, whether intended or not, and the royal family as a whole must now respond to a narrative they didn't fully release, but can no longer control. Because once the public becomes part of the story, it stops being contained. It evolves, it expands, it takes on a life of its own. And in that expansion, it begins to reveal something the palace may have underestimated, that the world is no longer content with waiting in silence. But as the world watches and reacts, one detail continues to haunt those closest to the situation. This may only be the beginning of what's about to unfold. A coronation dress is never just a dress. Every stitch carries meaning. Every thread tells a story. And if Catherine's gown is already being created, then its design may reveal more than the palace ever intended to disclose. Because within its fabric could lie clues about power, about legacy, and about the future direction of the monarchy itself. For centuries, royal coronation attire has functioned as a silent language, one understood not through words but through symbols. Colors are never chosen at random. Patterns are never purely decorative. Even the smallest detail can carry centuries of history, layered with intention, signaling continuity or, in rare cases, change. And that is what makes this moment so significant. Because if Catherine's dress is already taking shape, then the story it tells is already being written long before the world is meant to hear it. Traditionally, these garments have reinforced stability. They echo the past, drawing on established imagery to reassure the public that the monarchy remains rooted, unchanged, dependable. But there are whispers, quiet, cautious suggestions that this design may not follow that path entirely. That within its construction, there may be elements that point not backward but forward. And if that's true, it signals something far more profound than a simple transition of power. It suggests evolution. That possibility opens the door to speculation. What messages might be woven into this dress? What choices are being made that could subtly redefine how the monarchy presents itself to the world? Because symbolism does not need to be obvious to be powerful. In fact, its strength often lies in its subtlety, in the way it shapes perception without ever announcing its intent. And those who understand this language will be watching closely, searching for meaning in every detail. But symbolism is not always about what is intended. Sometimes it reveals more than those creating it anticipate. A design choice meant to honor tradition can also highlight deviation. A modern element introduced carefully can still stand out enough to signal change. And in a moment like this, where every decision feels accelerated, even the smallest deviation can carry amplified significance. For Catherine, this dress becomes more than representation, it becomes reflection. Not just of the role she is stepping into, but of the expectations surrounding her. Because wearing something crafted with this level of intention is not passive. It is an act of acceptance. It is stepping fully into a narrative that has already been shaped, already been decided, and now awaits its public unveiling. And that carries an emotional weight that cannot be ignored. There is something deeply unsettling in that realization. That before a single official word has been spoken, before any announcement has confirmed what lies ahead, the evidence may already exist stitched into fabric, hidden in plain sight. The dress in this sense becomes more than preparation. It becomes proof. Proof that the future is not just anticipated, but already in motion. And the more that possibility takes hold, the harder it becomes to dismiss what this truly represents. Because if the symbolism is already being finalized, if the message is already being crafted, then the decision behind it must already be complete. Not pending. Not uncertain. Complete. And as these symbols begin to take shape, one final question emerges: what exactly is the palace preparing the world for? There is always a moment just before everything changes. A moment where the future is no longer uncertain, just unspoken. If Catherine's coronation dress is already being made, then that moment may be closer than anyone realizes. The silence from the palace isn't reassuring, it's deliberate. Because when the announcement finally comes, it won't be a surprise, it will be a confirmation of what has already begun. Everything now points in one direction, even if no one inside the palace is willing to say it out loud. The signals are too aligned, too precise to dismiss as coincidence. A dress already underway. A timeline quietly accelerating. A narrative unfolding without formal acknowledgement. Piece by piece, the uncertainty that once surrounded Catherine's future is dissolving, replaced by something far more definitive: inevitability. And inevitability in a system built on control is never revealed until it is absolutely certain that certainty explains the silence. Because this is not the kind of silence that comes from hesitation or confusion. It is controlled. Intentional. Strategic. The kind of silence that holds information back not because it doesn't exist, but because it is being timed. Every word, every announcement, every confirmation is being measured against a larger plan, one that is already in motion, even if the public has yet to fully grasp it. And in that silence, tension builds. You can feel it now. In the way conversations have shifted, in the way speculation no longer feels distant but immediate. The anticipation has changed. It's no longer about wondering if something will happen, it's about waiting for the moment it's finally revealed. That emotional shift is subtle, but powerful, because once anticipation replaces uncertainty, the outcome is no longer in question. Only the timing remains. And within that growing tension, Catherine herself is no longer just part of the story, she has become its center. Not gradually, not over time, but suddenly, as if the narrative has been pulled forward to meet her before she was meant to arrive. The role she was expected to grow into is now shaping around her in real time, redefining how she is seen, how she is understood, how she is expected to lead. This is no longer preparation. This is transformation. What makes this moment even more striking is the realization that the public may already be witnessing the future just without a name attached to it yet. The signs are there. The patterns are visible. The clues have been placed carefully, almost subtly, as if inviting observation without confirmation. And those paying close attention can already see where this is heading, even if the final step has yet to be taken. Because that step is coming. It has to be. A process like this does not begin without an end already in sight. And when it arrives, it will not feel sudden. It will feel inevitable, like something that was always going to happen. Something that has been unfolding quietly, steadily, just beneath the surface. And in that moment, when speculation finally gives way to reality, when silence is replaced with confirmation, everything will shift. Not just for Catherine, not just for the monarchy, but for the way this entire story is understood. Because what once felt like a possibility will be revealed as something much more deliberate, something that has been building from the very beginning. Because when that moment finally arrives, the world won't just witness a coronation, it will realize it was watching the beginning all along. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.